Hello and welcome to Business Validation 101. So if you're starting a new business, if you're starting a new area within your business, if you're thinking about starting a new product or service, whatever it is, one of the main things that you have to do is validate it. Now, I know this from personal experience. My first business, Trove, we got £10,000 in funding while I was still at university. And it actually turned out that we ended up basically wasting all of that money because we didn't actually validate the business properly. So I learned the lesson the hard way that validation is absolutely essential within a business, and it's really important to do it. Now, most people, when they start out, this is how they go about validating their business. They start off and they say, well, they come up with a new business idea, and then they go to their friends and family and tell them about the idea, saying that, I think this is what I'm going to do. Then the friends and family will come and tell you, that's a great idea, that's a great thing, even if your friends and family aren't even your ideal customer, okay? And then after that, you'll assume that, this idea is good, people would really like this, you'd go and try and sell it, right? But you've got validation from the wrong people, and then what happens is you struggle to get sales, and often you take it personally and think, I'm a wreck, I'm rubbish at business, I don't know what I'm doing, and then you even might end up quitting on an amazing idea, all because you went and validated it with the wrong people. Okay, so today we're going to be breaking down a few different things within how you can actually validate your ideas properly. So how you can validate demand, how you can validate payment. We're going to talk a little bit about testing and refining your idea. And also I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise at the end, which is actually how you actually validate your ideas properly. Okay, so just before we get into that, a little bit more context about myself. So my name is Graham Singh. I'm the founder of G-Team Academy. So this one is me. If you couldn't tell, this is not me. This is Adnan. He is my business partner. And one of the things I think is just important in terms of context is that the stuff that we do, like the entrepreneurs that we work with, we've got over 50 entrepreneurs in our academy. We coach entrepreneurs making up to 4.5 million plus a year. And we have our clients on average grow their revenue month on month by 23%. That's across all of our clients. Okay. Now, if you know business and you know how much important revenue growth is, if you could grow revenue by 23% a month, it's pretty substantial. Okay. But that's how we actually help people. We tell them how to make good decisions, and as a result, we help them to be able to grow their business. Okay. And it's just as simple as that. Now, in terms of a little bit more of our background, just to give you a few examples of if you're thinking about validating your business, what kind of things have we done in the past of shown that it actually exists and shown that we can do things well. We've took someone like Mac and generated, he's never made a sale in his life. We helped him to generate his first sale of £1,000. His first sale ever was $1,000, sorry. We took Macy and we generated we 2.3x'd her revenue within 30 days. And then with Connor, we took him from £2,000 a month to £10,000 a month in 6 months. Okay, so these are the things that we've done, and it starts off with actually validating the ideas, making sure this makes sense. Once we understand something makes sense, we can then go and scale it. But if you're actually serious about if you're serious about making money, you have to know exactly what's going on within the business. Does anyone actually want it? So just the final slide, a few more testimonials that you can see on our Trustpilot. But I want to move on to section 1, which is actually validate people want your product and service, right? And I split into two sections: want and will pay for, right? Because people often get the two confused, right? Now, I'm going to say, before you even start thinking about validation, there's a few things that I absolutely recommend you get in place, okay? First thing is you've got to find a really painful problem. Most people don't. If I ask you, what problem does your business solve? Most entrepreneurs struggle to tell me the answer. And I ask them over and over and over again, and I don't let them move on until they tell me a strong answer of exactly what they're trying to solve, okay? And once you can tell me and communicate this is a problem, I ask them, how painful is it? Are people actually desperate for the solution? Do people really need something like this? Will it transform their life in a big way? If the answer is no, I typically tell them, there's something else that's probably going to be better for you to focus on, because when you start out, you need to have a problem that is actually prominent, right? You need to have customers that are willing to pay you above anything else, right? So try and find a painful problem to start off with. The second thing is you need to know exactly who your customer is. If you're thinking about validating, right, like I said, sometimes you might try and validate an idea by going to the wrong customer. If you don't know who your customer is, none of the validation that we go through is going to matter. It's not going to make a bit of difference, because you can go and try and validate things, and even if you have a successful validation and loads of people say that they're interested, loads of people putting money down to say yes, I want to go for this, you don't know who you're selling to, right? And you might have done something massively wrong within the business that'll cost you a lot in the long run. So please figure out exactly who you're selling to. And then the last thing is create a hypothesis. Okay, so before we validate our business, your entire business is it's an idea, when it's early stage, it's just a big assumption, right? I think that people will pay for something like this. I think that people will want this service. I think that entrepreneurs that are struggling with managing their time and priorities, that are wasting effort in lots of different ways, need clarity, right? These are hypotheses, right? And by having a hypothesis, it makes it easier for us to validate the business, because we can validate segments of the hypothesis. So if I say, I think there's people out there that are willing to pay thousands of pounds a month for good business coaching, I can then say, well, that's my hypothesis. How can I go and test that? Can I see if anyone else is doing it? Can I blah, 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 right? We'll go into the different methods of doing it. I'm giving you a little sneak peek. But the third thing is, you need to understand, like, what is your vision for the business, and like, how does that translate to what you're going to do, right? And that's essentially what your hypothesis is, okay? Now, once you've got these three things in place, we can actually look in terms of like, what are the different methods that you can actually validate something. Now, the way we've laid it out is that there's 6 main ways that you can do this. And there might be a few more, there might be a few less, you might be able to condense a couple of these. This is the way that we've set things out, and this is the way that I think it's just easier to contextualize things, okay? So the very first way that you can validate that someone might want your service is by doing some market research, okay? So for example, one of the use cases, and I'm going to be giving you use cases for every one of these validation methods, is Netflix, right? Netflix saw that a lot of people in Blockbuster, a lot of their customers weren't happy, and they seen that it was a big market. There was loads of people that were interested in this kind of this desire to have more films, to have these things on demand. Netflix seen that demand was there because they could see what Blockbuster was doing, and that helped them to validate their business idea, because they could see, well, there's another player that's really big in this market. There's another player that's charging X, Y, and Z in this market, which means that they could see immediately, okay, people are willing to do this, right? And this is often the easiest way and the least time-consuming way that you can validate anything, because you don't have to actually like get stuck into it, right? Now, market research, it can be a little bit difficult if you don't know what you're doing, and often as entrepreneurs, we have a really strong bias to say that something is needed, even if it's not. So even though this is good, and I like market research in terms of like a strategy, there are a couple of weaknesses, right? So I'm not going to go through everything on this. I don't want to like give you death by PowerPoint. So I'm just going to touch on a couple points that I think are the most relevant, and you can contextualize the different methods and see what would work best for you. So I've already talked about the strengths briefly, but the weaknesses, I think a big one is that you're also going off historical data. If you see a lot of trends, typically, if you're using studies, if you're using like a lot of the time, if you're going back and like Googling things, there might not be up-to-date research with exactly what's going on. One of the things that I'd recommend is that try and find as relevant details as possible, because especially nowadays, especially with AI, things are moving very, very quickly. And if your market research, like let's say you're doing market research, SEO might have been trending recently for like websites and stuff like that, but AI could come away and take that away very, very quickly. So you've got to be up to date with the trends of what else is going on in the world, okay? And sometimes if you're early stage, you don't even know what those trends are going to be. So it can be hard to understand that. The other thing that I think is really important is that if you're looking at, let's say, a competitor, and you're like, okay, well, this person's got business, it doesn't necessarily mean that people want something else. It doesn't mean that people want something different. Let's say for example, Blockbuster. I actually wasn't around in the Blockbuster days. I think I definitely recognize the logo and stuff like that, but it's not something that I use much, right? But let's use a more common example, like Apple Music versus Spotify, for example. If I am on Apple Music and I see lots of people talking about Spotify, I might be really, really content with Apple Music, and I don't see any difference with Spotify. And as a result, like, you might think, as a competitor, if you're in Spotify's shoes, you might think, okay, well, there's loads of people on Apple Music. That means I can go get a slice of that market. But realistically, if that product is serving all of my needs and I'm really happy with it, and there's no problem with that product or service, I probably won't switch. Yeah. So you've got to really think about, okay, if I'm trying to enter a new market, I also need to understand how loyal someone is or how happy someone is with the product or service that is shown the demand. Yeah, because a lot of the time people won't change their behaviors as quickly or as easily as you might think. Like another example is that I'm a business coach. I can see that there's lots of people that are business coaches out there, and I could look at, let's say, someone like Alex Hormozi and say, okay, loads of people are going to Alex Hormozi for business advice, right? Now, I might think, oh well, okay, that means I can go and give business advice. But the reason why Alex Hormozi can give loads of great business advice is because he sold companies for multi-million pounds, right? Like he sold companies for over 46 million. He's got a portfolio company doing over 100 million a year. Like that's why people are going to say yes to that. Whereas if I come along and say, well, Alex Hormozi's got loads of people that follow him, so that means I can create an audience as well. It's like it doesn't necessarily work like that because I haven't went and done all the things that Hormozi has, right? But there might be niches within that I can work on. So it takes a little bit of processing to understand exactly what the market, like understand exactly where you'd fit within the market. And I don't think market research always gives the full picture, right? So just keep that in mind, okay? There's more validation you'd have to do after this. But we'll move on to the next method. So that was market research. The next thing is passive testing, okay? Now, this is actually pretty interesting. Figma did this, where they didn't actually push for sales. So if you're not sure about Figma, it's like a design tool where you can do like, I think a lot of people use it for app development and like website development, where they'll show you like the different frames of what a website's going to look like. But it's a very like specific tool. But what was interesting is that they didn't push for sales. What they wanted to do is like grow off organic word of mouth. So they put this thing out there, and then they just seen like, okay, are people interested? Are people trying to use it more and more? And because they seen that there was more and more demand for it, that was their way of testing their product or service. People do want this clearly because like it's grown organically. Right. Now, this is good. I like passive testing as well because it shows real world interactions, right? Before you have to spend loads of money on marketing and trying to promote and sell to people. But the problem is that often it can be hard. Again, just because some people say like, oh yeah, this is interesting, I like it. It might not be. It doesn't show the strongest demand, essentially. The other thing as well is that if you're giving something away for free and people are sharing it more and more, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are willing to pay for it, okay? So passive test is good just to kind of like get interest and show people like, yeah, okay, this is working and it's kind of grown. Like, you might be growing followers, you might be growing users if you've got a service or whatever that you're giving away for like either really, really cheap or free, essentially. But it doesn't actually show that this is going to be viable in terms of like actually selling at the price that you might want to make a scalable model, right? It doesn't show that users are actually willing to pay what you might want them to pay. So just keep that in mind, okay? Now, feel free to pause the video and like actually go through this in a little bit more detail, because if you're new to validation, it'll help you to get a little bit of a better picture, right? Now, I'll move on to the next section because we've got a lot to get through. You've got direct outreach model. Now, this one I like, right? Because it's very like, it's very authentic. It's very engineering, not engineering. It's very entrepreneurial. Sorry, and it's often what I get a lot of my clients to do. Of, hey, I've got this idea. I want to do marketing agency. I want to do this thing. I want to do that. Okay, go and message 10 people that are your ideal clients and ask them if they're interested in something like this. Just go and speak to them. Go to a network event where your ideal clients are and see how they respond. See if they're interested. Like, go directly to the people, and as a result, that might be the thing that can actually like help to kickstart things, right? I've got one client who's a photographer, and it's literally just like, mate, if you're a photographer, just go and ask people, hey, do you want this thing? I've just made this new service. Does that sound like you'd be interested in it? Like, and just get responses, get feedback from people directly. It's a really easy way to do it. You got to be careful because some people will say yes just because they like you. But at the same time, if you do it with strangers, they're much less likely to say yes because they don't owe you anything and they don't feel the need to be like, oh, I want to help this guy out, or I don't want him to not like me because we're friends. So direct outreach, I'm a big fan of, and especially like if you can start to do a lot of outreach. Like a lot of the time people do outreach to like, let's say they've got 5 ICPs in mind. They message 5 ICPs. 2 of them respond. One of them says that they're not interested, and one of them says that they are. They're like, I don't know if this is viable. It's like, no, that's not enough data. If you're going to do direct outreach, I would say that you need to be messaging at least 100 people to get a good sample size of like, okay, out of these people, how many are actually interested? Yeah. Like, and again, make them your ICP. Okay. If you're having like really in-depth conversations with them, like, you know, you're on call, you're asking them a lot of questions about their business, you're asking them a lot of questions about what their needs are, whatever it is, like, then you could probably lower the number. But I would still be very skeptical about speaking to less than 50 people and thinking like, oh yeah, this business is completely viable. Like, I think that you really struggle to understand like how much people need your service or product if you speak to a small number. It's too small of a sample size. The bigger the sample size, the better the validation is going to be. And that's just general kind of maths, right? The more people you can get your product or service in front of, the more people you can ask, especially that are your ICP, the easier it's going to be for you to understand what the demand actually is, right? Now, I'll move on to, again, some strengths and weaknesses. The problem with, well, the strength is it's very direct, right? Like, if someone says, yes, I'm interested, like, that's very positive, okay? But the kind of challenge is that it might take a lot of time for you to do. My opinion is it's worth the time. The reason why it's worth the time is because if you're starting something new, you often don't even know what people want, okay? You might think you've got an idea of what people want, but often you don't. So the more conversations you can have with your customers at this stage, when you're early, the better. One big quote, I can't remember exactly who said it, but their quote is, if you can just speak to your customers, that will solve 99% of your problems within a business. Just speaking to your customers will solve 99% of your business. And I think that this is why this is such a strong model. Like, just being able to speak to people directly, I think it's very, very helpful. Yeah. Even though it might take you a little bit of time, I think it will do you more good than just trying to do something like where you're not too involved. Like, if you're going to make this journey into entrepreneurship, make the jump, go deep into it, actually try and understand your customers as much as possible. So that's the direct outreach method. And we'll move on to the intent-based testing product, right? So in this, there's a huge company, right, called Robinhood. And what they did is that they did a wait list for any of their users, right? Now, they managed to get over 1 million signups before their product was even released. If you have 1 million signups or something, you can pretty much guarantee that people are interested in it, right? But having something like this where you have like a wait list, you have something where people can say, yes, I'm interested, whatever it is, I often recommend, if you're going to do this, collect their emails and phone numbers or whatever information you can so you can contact them when you do launch. But essentially, even just having this can tell you whether or not people are interested. Now, we'll get into this on the last one, but you can couple this with outreach. You can couple this with ads. You can couple this with something else to just kind of like market it. You can create content, and then in the content, you can tell people, hey, if you're interested in this, I've got a wait list. Go and sign up through the link in my bio. And if people keep clicking the link in your bio and people keep putting their email saying, yes, I'm interested, that's a really positive sign. Yeah, it's a really positive sign. So intent-based marketing, people are signing up because they want something that you've told them that you're going to be able to give them in the future. Okay. Now we'll move on to the strengths and weaknesses for this one very quickly. Again, like, someone saying like, yes, I'm interested, that might be your friend or family. It's much stronger that you get like someone who's not your friend or family to sign up, because the way that you've communicated the product or service sounds interesting. Yeah. So it shows a lot more intent when someone signs up for a wait list or something like that, rather than just someone saying, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. It's like, no, like, give me your details so I can contact you about this thing when it launches. Especially if that comes from their end. Like, if I'm on a call with someone, I'm like, hey, would you be interested in signing up to this thing? Like, all I need is your name and email, and I'm selling them on the idea that they're going to be put onto a wait list. That is not as strong as someone organically coming across your website, coming across your page and being like, oh, this sounds interesting, I like this thing, and them signing up themselves. If you have to push people all the time to get people to sign up, that's an indication that your product or service might not be that interesting, but you are actually you're having to sell everything, right? Which realistically, if you've got a great idea, it should sell itself, okay? It should sell itself, right? Now, with that in mind, in terms of like the weaknesses, one of the things I would say is, out of these three, the incentive, or like, oh, you can be, one of the first users, you can get a discount, whatever it is. The offer has to be compelling and people have to really believe you're serious about creating this thing. One of the other things that I would recommend is that if you're going to like create a wait list or whatever, you have to show that this solves a problem that they're really struggling with. And if you're bad at like showing that this is the problem and you're bad at showing that this is how it's going to work, then you're going to struggle to get anyone to sign up for your thing. And you might think that that's because your product or service is crap, but it's not. It's just because you're really bad at selling it. You're really bad at communicating what it does. So it can be a little bit difficult if you're inexperienced in marketing to be able to do a wait list, right? But if we go back to our example here with Robinhood, clearly Robinhood knew exactly what they were talking about. They knew how to promote it. They knew how to tell people that this is what's different. This is what's new. This is how we're going to help you. And that's why 1 million people were signed up to the app before it was released. Yeah. So keep that in mind. Okay. We'll move on to number 5, which is action-based testing. So this one's quite interesting, and the example that I've got for this, I was pretty shocked at when I was doing some research about these things, and it was Reddit that I came to as a use case. And one of the things that Reddit did is when they started, the way that this testing works is that they want to see that people interact with the product or service, okay? So if you think about Reddit, if you're not familiar with Reddit, it is a social media platform where people have like forums and they talk about all these different things. But what happens is that people in the early days, they didn't have people talking about stuff, right? So what the founders did, which is quite cheeky and interesting, but it worked, is that they started these discussions, started having these chats. And as a result, people seeing that and thought, oh, actually, I want to speak about this thing. Oh, I don't know about that. I believe this. So, and all of a sudden, it started to create this demand and people started having more and more conversations. And then, because people started having more conversations, they were spending more time on the platform, they were talking about more stuff. That was what allowed them to validate that this business model actually worked. Okay? So, the difference between action-based testing and intent-based testing, intent is like, I want this thing, I've signed up to this waitlist, whatever it is. Action-based testing is more focused on like you give someone the product and they use it more and more, right? It might be a free version of the product. It might be like a portion of the product, but it's a way that they can like actually interact with it and be like, yeah, okay, like this thing I will use more and more, or I like the usage of this thing. Yeah. So action-based testing. Okay, so I'm sure like even if you think about something like Canva, most like Canva in the early days, before they started like charging and having all these pro features, one of the things that they would have done is like, okay, how regularly are people using Canva? How often are users coming back? Are they coming on every single day? Are they coming on and then they're making one thing? Are they making 100 things? If they're making loads of different things instead of using it once every 6 months, that means that people really like our product and service. That means that there's a demand. That means that they'd most likely pay for it. And that's why so many people would then convert to the pro plans. Yeah. So just think about that for a second as well. Like in terms of when you're thinking about testing something, if you can test people actually using your product or service, that's a great way to validate whether or not someone actually wants it. Yeah. Because some people can sign up for it, but that doesn't mean that they care about it. The only thing that you have to think about this in terms of like validation is that you have to be able to track like meaningful things. And the other aspect is you have to have some sort of setup, right? Like you have to have something that people can actually try. The last thing on this is that just because someone will try something for free doesn't mean that they will they'll continue to try it on a paid way. Now, just to give another example of like people trying things for free and then not doing things for paid. There's someone called Jay Shetty. Some of you guys might be familiar with him. It's got a little bit dodgy. I wouldn't get too much into it, but one of the things that he said, it was that when he was doing talks in university, when they were free, he would absolutely pack out the theatres that he was speaking in. And what happened is that when he put the price up to £5 per talk, that's when he had no one show up at all, right? And just because something's free and like people were talking about it, they loved it, they were buzzing about it, just because they talked about it and said, like, yeah, I'm going to show up, I'm going to be there, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're also willing to pay money for it. Yeah, because someone that might be using it for free, let's say they're students, when you ask them to pay £5, they might be like, I don't have money like that. Even though it's £5, you might assume that they have money like that, but they might say like, no, I'd rather spend my money on something else, right? You got to think about these things as well in terms of like not putting yourself into this trap where you think people are interested in it just because they say that they're interested. Even action-based testing, right? Like I'm going to get into the last method, but what we're going to dive into straight after that is actual, like, how do you get people to pay? How do you get people to show that they'll put money down? Okay, so bear with me through the last one, which is quite quick, and then we'll get into the payment side of things. So this one is actually just hybrid validation method, and it's pretty obvious. It's pretty straightforward. It's just combining a few of these different things. So maybe you're going to do some market research, and then you do some market research and realize that, okay, I'm going to do some direct outreach off the back of that, or I'm going to do some action-based testing. Yeah, I'm going to run some ads, and I'm going to see if anyone comes through passive. Yeah, like if they start to like actually like engage more and refer more people to the product or service. Okay, so these are that's the kind of last model. And just to give you an example of this, Kindle did a really good job with this, like in terms of its process. So Amazon Kindle was validated using multiple strategies. They analyzed market trends, they gathered feedback from potential customers through outreach, they then created a waiting list and then set up pre-orders as well, right? So for action-based testing. Through combining them, they've sold over 100 million units worldwide, right? So like not just one or two things, they combine 4 different methods to like actually validate their business properly. And I would say that the more methods you can integrate, the stronger it's going to be. Obviously, if you integrate, it's more complex, it's more time and resource intensive. So you've just got to be a little bit careful with the stage that you're at, that you don't pour loads and loads and loads into testing without actually, getting an MVP running, without actually like putting something in front of your customers. Because I also have seen people go the complete opposite way, go into validation too much, and then as a result, they just delay trying to create this perfect product and never actually get anything out there. Yeah. So this is a hybrid validation method. Again, like take your time to look through these slides and actually think about what works best for you. But this is the methods to validate that people actually want your product or service. Okay. Next thing we're going to move into is how to validate that people will actually pay for your product or service. Now, the thing you've probably been waiting for is how to validate that people will actually pay for your product and service. And the reason why I went for want first and then pay is because sometimes you can't always validate that someone will pay for your service straight away. Sometimes it requires a little bit more work on the back end just to make sure you know what you're actually doing, right? I wouldn't recommend that you rush straight into getting people to try and pay for your service, because the likelihood is, especially if you're new, there's things that you don't know, right? You think there's things that you haven't tested, there's things that you haven't thought about. And if you go out and you start asking loads of people for money and you start trying to sell this thing before actually understanding if there's any kind of interest or demand in it, you might end up biting the hand that might feed you, okay? You might go and ask them for money before you even ask if they're interested, right? And I would, like, even from a sales point of view, my sales calls never start with, hey, do you want to buy this thing? It's like, no, hey, by the way, like, what are you interested in? Right, like what are you looking for? Like, what's going on at the moment? Tell me about, like, the struggles that you've had with X problem, right? You don't go and ask for payment straight away. You ask for, are you interested? Is there something there that, like, have you got a problem? Is there something I can help you with, right? And then we get into the pay side of things, and that's why I've structured the presentation in this kind of format. But let's get into it, okay? Because this stuff is the exciting stuff, right? That everyone wants to know. How can I get people to pay for my stuff? The first thing is just go out and try and sell what your offer is, right? Now, the thing about this is that you don't actually even need to build the bloody thing before you ask for payment. You can just go and ask for people and say, like, hey, I'm building this thing. This is everything that's going to be included. And by the way, when you're selling something to start off with, you can throw so much into that offer. You can push them and say, like, it's going to have this, it's going to do this, it's going to do that, before you try and fulfill it, right? Now, let's say you try and sell it and someone says yes, perfect. Right? Then you go and build the thing, okay? Or maybe you say, someone says, yes, I want this. They put money down, they give you money for it, and then you have to go and build the thing and say, okay, perfect. Just give me 7 days and you get this thing ready, and then I'll give it to you, right? Or by the way, we're on a waiting list. We're just onboarding people. I'll onboard you next week. In the meantime, please take a look at these few things, right? Whatever it is. But you sell to them, you take money from them, and then you go and build the thing. I had something that I was working on with a client, which was a high ticket offer, right? And I was like, hey, okay, we've got this program, it covers this, it covers that, it covers these things. These are all the things that we're going to do. I hadn't made the slides, I haven't made the documents, I hadn't went through any of that. I just asked them, I said, like, hey, do you want to do this thing? And he was like, yeah, sure, sounds interesting, right? He put the money down, I was like, perfect. And then I went and built the slides, I went and did the research, I went and figured out how to actually deliver this thing that I've just promised this guy, right? Now, obviously, you've got to be careful and you've got to have faith in your ability to be able to deliver. But at the same time, like, getting the money for it is a really strong way of finding out that people want your product or service, okay? So just deep that for a second. Like, you can sell something without having it there. And then if someone says, like, and then let's say you can't build it for whatever reason, you say, hey, I'm really sorry, there's a problem with X, Y, and Z. Unfortunately, we can't deliver the full thing. So what we can do is we can refund part of the order and just deliver this thing that you can actually deliver, right? Whatever it is. It might not be great in terms of the trust side of things, but in terms of validation, like, if you know someone's willing to pay you money for that thing, you go and figure out how to build it, no matter what happens, right? Because if you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to figure out how you're going to be able to actually build something. Like, go and take the things that people say that they want, go and build them, right? Now, an example of this is Pebble smartwatch, right? Now, they raised over $10 million on Kickstarter, and that was before it was in production. So they just said, these are all the things that we're going to do. This is the thing that the watch is going to have. This is what's going to be different about it. And then, once people put loads of money into it, they were like, okay, great, now we need to go build the thing. That's all right. Like, that's completely fine. The amount of businesses I've worked as well that have been in funding stages where it's like the whole investor side of things. Investors often put millions into a product before they've even launched, right? Because they believe in the idea of it. And they're willing to put their money into something because they believe it. And you've just got to go and find those people that are willing to put money into your product or service because they believe that this is the solution. You might not be able to show them everything, but they'll still be willing to put money down, right? If you find the right person. So try and get this in order. And the reason why I really like this, by the way, is because if you can get someone to put money down, you can then take their money, use it to actually develop the thing, and then give it to them. And you've just used someone else's money to fund your business. Right? Most businesses can operate like that. They don't even need funding. A lot of the people that I see saying, oh, I need to get investment, I'm going to get 20,000, 30,000, 50,000, whatever it is, they say that I'm going to go get investment for these things. I'm like, why? You just need to sell something. And then once you sold it, you just go and fulfill it, and then you just take your cut from that. The problem is you don't know how to sell. It's not that you don't have a good product and stuff like that, and you need to go and develop that. It's like you literally just need to be able to sell it to someone first, and then you can go and develop it. Obviously, there's exceptions with like really high-ticket stuff or things that take mass amounts of production and things like that. But generally speaking, most people don't need investment. They just need to be able to sell what they offer. And once they can sell what they offer before actually delivering it, like that'll open up a lot of doors that they aren't even aware of. So section 1 was pre-sale offer, and now the second thing that we're going to do is a prototype offer. Okay, so what I like about prototype offers is that it allows you to get a feedback loop going very, very quickly. Okay, so just from a prototype point of view, if you have, let's say, you've got a software that you're developing, and you're thinking like, okay, is this going to work? Will people want this? Instead of like getting everything finished and everything really nicely designed and all the colors and everything like that perfect, if you just had an MVP, and let's say you're a lead gen agency, right? I know that there's one person that might watch this that will be a lead gen agency, and if you're trying to sell your product or service, you just give them the bare bones of it that will help someone to generate leads. Okay, it might not be fancy, it might not have all the features, it might not be nice user experience and all this extra stuff, but it's just like a basic version. And you say to someone like this is how it works, this is how it functions. Would you be willing to use this, right? And would you be willing to pay for this on a monthly model or whatever it's going to be? And if someone says yes, then perfect, right? Like that's it. That's all you need to do. Now, the thing with this is that it means that you don't have to spend loads and loads of time on development, getting the perfect product before you actually start selling. You can just sell a beta version of the thing that you're selling, and that is going to allow you to say like, okay, yes, like people are using the product, people are willing to pay for it, that's fine. Right? So the two models that we have to start with is firstly just pre-selling the actual thing that you're going to have, right? Before you've built anything. The second option is to give them like a prototype. So that could be a really simple version of it. Even just like going back to this Airbnb, right? Airbnb, the whole purpose of it is to connect people that need a house that have got a house, right? And you say like, hey, you need a place to stay. These are the people that you can stay with, right? And they would connect those people. We've got an app and like now these kind of automations and like the search engine and all this kind of stuff which makes things easier. But to start with, the founders actually would personally visit the host in New York. They would take the pictures, they would list the properties and manually like actually match things up, right? Manually doing that. Think about that for a second. The whole business of Airbnb is matching people up. They just did a manual version of it and said like, okay, well, if people start saying yes to this and they like this, then great, we'll just do it ourselves before we invest in all this tech, all this back end, all these different systems and processes. We'll just do it ourselves, right? That's a prototype, okay? And the prototype that told them that this thing is worth it and people are willing to use this system and put money into it, right? So again, prototype offers very, very strong, right? Now the next thing that we're going to look at is deposit tests, right? Now this one's pretty straightforward. Most people are familiar with what a deposit test looks like, but just to give you another example, a really strong one was the Tesla Cybertruck. Now they used a deposit test and they said it's £100 deposit and it led to 1 million pre-orders. 1 million pre-orders. Okay, so when you think about a Cybertruck, like or any other kind of product that you want to sell, if you can get someone to put money down saying yes, I'm interested in this product, that is much stronger than a waiting list, right? Someone said that I will pay money now. I'm engaging in this transactional contract with you to say that I'll put this much down for now. If I'm happy with everything, then I'll pay you more later. I've got another client that I work with. He does remaps on cars. He says, hey, you just put a £50 deposit down and then you pay the rest once I've actually done the work on your car, once I've done the remap, okay? It's a really strong model because people will just say like, okay, like, yes, I'm interested in this. I'm willing to put the money down. Boom. Yeah? You know that people actually want the thing because they've put their money where their mouth is instead of just saying like, that sounds interesting, let me get back to you. Yeah? So that's a real life example. Tesla Cybertruck, you know, there's lots of different ways that you can do like deposits, but just asking someone like, hey, by the way, like if I was going to do it for GTM Academy, hey, we're opening up this new coaching program that takes you from 0 to 5K in 6 months, right? Or if you're interested in that, it's going to be £100 deposit, right? And that will be refundable once you actually start the program. Whatever, refundable, non-refundable, doesn't matter. But the main thing is that you're telling someone that this is the service that you're going to get. If you want to secure your place in it, if you want to secure your product or service, then you just put some money down. And if you can put some money down, then that means that I know that you actually want the thing. Okay? So that's the deposit test. Now, the last way that we're going to look at this is actually just a pay for progress model. I really like this model because unlike the other ones, right, these are more so like validation methods. But this last one is actually almost shifting the business model a little bit. Now, you could just do this for a temporary amount of time. And what I mean by pay for progress, firstly, is that you just charge customers for a segment of what they're looking for. So the easiest way that I can think about this is if you're a lead gen agency, and let's say I'm going to run Facebook ads for you, you don't have to pay me anything, right? All you have to do is pay me when I book an appointment. So every time I book an appointment, I'm going to charge you £100. I'm going to charge you £200, whatever it's going to be. But you know that you're only paying for the result of the thing, okay? If I'm speaking to a client and I say, hey, by the way, like, you know, I'm a lead gen agency, I can help you to get more leads. It's just going to be pay per appointment. So every time, like, if they say yes to that, it's really easy for them to say yes, firstly. And secondly, it tells you, like, that they're willing to pay you for the result of what you actually offer. Yeah. So if I was going to think about this from a coaching model, I could say to a client like, hey, look, our coaching is completely free, but every time you make £1,000, we want £250. Yeah. The nice thing about that, the reason why this works a lot of the time, is because people think, oh, well, if I'm going to get that result, I'd be willing to give this away. So for every £1,000 I make you, for every £1,000 I make, I'm going to give you 250. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah. People will say yes to paying you without having to actually put any money down, but they're actually interested in you delivering the service. They're actually interested in you delivering the results, right? Like you see lawyers do this all the time where they say no win, no fee, right? That is an incredible offer. I don't have to pay you unless I'm actually getting paid myself. Great, let's do it. Sign me up. Yeah, because people are paying for the progress that they're making rather than paying for a product or service that they're not sure about. If loads of people come to you and say that, yes, I'm willing to engage in this contract. And by the way, when I say contract, I'm willing to engage in this thing. If someone signs up for a lead gen agency, you have to get them to sign a contract or a no-win, no legal fee. You have to get them to sign a contract of like, look, if we do win the case legally, you will have to pay me this money, right? The thing that you don't want to do, and what I wouldn't call a sale, is like, let's say I speak to someone and say, hey, we're doing a pay-per-lead model. Are you interested? They say yes. That's not you selling them, right? You haven't closed them on that deal. But if you say to someone else, like, hey, this is the contract. If you want to go ahead and pay me £200 for every lead that I get you, or every appointment that I book in, then here, just sign on this dotted line. And they sign on the dotted line. That's a sale. Yeah, that's a pay per progress, because they're willing to now pay you per progress and they're liable to pay you, right? Don't get it confused with like, oh, like someone said yes to someone's engaged in a contract. Because when someone's engaged in a contract, they are, again, putting their money where their mouth is. They do have to legally pay you at that point if you deliver the results. So that is a sale. Yeah, it just changes the business model to de-risk things on the customer side and actually show you, do people want the result? Yeah, and the good thing about this is if you do if you do pay per progress and you get good results, let's say I'm a lead gen agency and I say it's going to be £200 per lead that I get you. In the first month I get you 20 leads and you've got to pay me $4,000, right? Or I'll get you 20 booked appointments and you've got to pay me $4,000. You might be like, okay, that's good. But what you can then do after you've done the pay for progress, yeah, it is pay for progress, sorry. Once you've done that, then you can turn around and say, well, you paid me $4,000 for each lead. If I was to sell you on a contract for $2,000 monthly, and I'm just going to continue getting these leads, so you don't have to pay me that much, you can then go to other people and say, hey, by the way, I just generated 20 leads for this person. They paid me $4,000 for it. If you wanted me to generate similar amount of leads for you, you just have to pay me $2,000. Yeah. So like you can then sell the product a lot easier once you've validated it. Hopefully this makes sense, right? If this is making sense to you, good. You're in a good mental space. If not, it's my fault for not communicating with you. So please, if you don't understand this, drop it down in the comments. But what I mean, again, like just to clarify, once you can validate these different types, right? So all the different things that we went through, okay? Pre-sale, prototype, deposit, pay for progress. If you can get someone that's interested, you can then leverage that to say, hey, by the way, if it's pre-sale, by the way, we just sold someone else on this as well. Like we just got Mark down the street who said that he's really interested in our new coaching program. Hey, by the way, we just had 6 people go for a model 0.1 Tesla, or whatever it's going to be, right? People have just put a deposit down. People can see like how many like deposits have been put down for this product or service. You know, you could be like X on the waiting list. People, again, like you get someone results, like again, you can sell this more and more. So this validation stuff is not just validating your business, but it's also, it can be the foundation for marketing your business in the future, right? So I'm getting very passionate about this. Hopefully it makes sense. Hopefully the last model makes sense for you as well. What I'm going to move on to now is section 3, and this is like real business validation. So what I want you to think about now is that we've went through quite a few different things. I want you to sit down and take some time because there's a lot of information there, right? There's a lot of things that we went through. I want you to be able to know you can actually apply this information to your business. And if you're sitting there thinking, oh, I'm pretty early stage, I don't have a business yet, try these 3 scenarios, right? I've got scenario 1, which is easy, and it's a digital course that you're trying to validate. I've got scenario 2, which is medium, which is like a travel mug. And again, I've just got some more details in there. And then scenario 3, which is like trying to sell a home gym, a high-ticket home gym to people. Okay, I've also listed some challenges to consider. If you want to test your ability to be able to validate people, like validate business models, try it with these things. It's a really good activity for you to do. If not, if you've got your own business, do with that. Yeah. However, validate things. Even when I look at my current business and I think, okay, like, you know, we're doing well, we're in a decent position. If I think about validation of our business, I'm like, oh, we actually didn't validate things that much, like as well as we should have. You know, we've got a new product or service that we actually have got a new service that we're building up at the moment. We're trying to validate that, and we're using these frameworks to be able to understand how we should validate what we do. Okay, so that's the kind of last thing that I wanted to mention. Try and actually apply what we've learned to real businesses. Okay, and that's why I try to give you so many actual examples of real businesses as well, because I want you to know that this is how the business world works. You have to be able to learn how to validate something if you're trying to start a new business, because if you don't validate things, you're going to really, really struggle. So that's it from me. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments, drop me a message. But last thing is, if you're interested in actually getting around other entrepreneurs like yourself, we've got an academy. We've got 50 entrepreneurs in there. All of them we're speaking to regularly about validating their business, growing their business, getting more sales, getting more income, scaling up what they're doing. If you're interested in getting around other entrepreneurs like yourself, then definitely go and apply using the link below in the description. That's it from me. If you've got any other questions, leave them in the comments, and I hope you enjoy one of these 2 videos.